Stellantis has officially unveiled the twin-turbo 3-liter inline-6 engine, horsepower, torque, and a whole lot of other specs. So let's get started. Welcome back to the channel. Like I said, Stellantis has officially unveiled the twin-turbo inline-6. I know it's a love it or hate it kind of thing, and we're probably more on the hate it side for a lot of Hemi guys. But before I get into the horsepower, torque, and engine specs, I do want to mention a rumor that I'm hearing in one or two different articles. Not a lot of articles. Most articles are not mentioning this, so I don't want to say it's true. I want to say it's a chance, but I'm not confirming it. Now, originally this was said to replace the Hemi. There was not going to be any more Hemi. But I found two articles that are saying that this inline 6 will be sold next to the Hemi as an option in some vehicles. Other vehicles, it may become standard equipment. They did not specify which of those vehicles that was going to be, other than the Grand Wagoneer. Now that I found they said was going to also get a 6.4 liter Hemi engine with the option of the inline 6. That could possibly change. Now, like I said, I only found two articles that were saying that it's not consistent across the board, so I don't want to confirm that the Hemis are sticking around for a while. There is a chance that we may still have Hemis alongside of this inline 6, but let's not hold our breath until we get confirmation on that. Now, with that being said, we do have specs on the standard output and the high output engines. So let's talk about horsepower and torque first. For the standard output engine, Stellantis is saying it will make more than, emphasis on more, than 400 horsepower and more than 450 pound-feet of torque, with peak power coming in at 5,800 RPM. Now, I know that's not a high RPM engine, and that's completely fine. That is a standard output engine. But that being said, more than, we don't know official specs, but they're saying more than 400, is already more power than the 5.7 Hemi engine and far more torque. Now, I know it still doesn't sound like a V8 and it never will, but we can't deny that's good power for the standard output engine. Now, that power is going to be created with 22 pounds of boost coming for those twin turbos. Now, those twin turbos are actually set up pretty interestingly because each turbo is feeding 3 cylinders. Now, that's a pretty unique design. I honestly didn't expect that, and Stellantis did say this engine was done completely from scratch, whole new idea. So this is all part of their plan for both more power and better emissions, which I will get to that in a minute too. But overall, 400 plus horsepower, 450 plus pound-feet of torque out of the standard variant engine. Now, the high output engine. This is said to be putting out more than, again, emphasis on more than 500 horsepower and 475 pound-feet of torque, max power coming in at 6,100 RPMs. Now, Stellantis did say that the turbos on the HO engine are going to be slightly different than the ones on the SO engine, and the ones on the HO will be putting out 26 pounds of boost as opposed to the 22 on the standard output. Now, to me, I'm not a turbo expert, but I do know 26 pounds of boost is quite a bit. Obviously, with a high output engine, you're also getting a little bit of higher RPM range with 6,100 RPMs as opposed to 5,800. And they're also saying that both configurations will be getting 90% of their torque at around 2,350 RPM and will carry all the way to redline. So if we're talking the HO engine, 90% of 475 pound-feet of torque at 2,350 RPM is definitely going to get your car, truck, or whatever this is in moving rather quickly. Now, before I continue, I want your thoughts on the horsepower and torque numbers, because honestly, this is a lot higher than I initially expected. I thought the horsepower numbers were going to be right around what a 5.7 Hemi would be, you know, maybe the upper 300s, maybe hitting that 400 mark. But when they're putting in parentheses more than 400 for a standard and more than 500 for the HO, I'm impressed. I think these engines are going to do really well. And I know it's going to be a hard pill to swallow for V8 guys. I am a hardcore V8 guy. I love the sound of the Hemis, whether it be the 5.7, the 6.4, the Hellcat 6.2. It doesn't matter. They just sound awesome. But I can't deny the power that this engine is putting out. Now, we know that the EPA regulations and emissions are some of the reasons why Stellantis had to come up with this engine. Now, they're claiming that the standard output engine produces 15% less CO2 than the larger displacement V8s, and the HO version produces 13% less. And they're saying that does put them on target to meet their carbon net zero initiative by 2038. Now let's go through some other specs of this engine, starting with compression ratios. The standard output engine will have a 10.4 to 1 compression, while the HO version will have a 9.4 to 1 compression. Now they're saying that the two variations will share about 96 common parts, including the block and oil pan design. They're saying the major differences are going to be their internals, the intake plumbing, valve train components, and the turbos themselves. Stellantis also said they're not ready to share the specs of the turbos or who's manufacturing them at this time. Now, they said the block was going to be all aluminum, which is also going to shave weight, bringing the standard output engine's weight to about 430 pounds. The high output variation will come in 11 pounds heavier at 441 pounds. Now, in comparison, the 5.7 Hemi engine, they said, will vary between 550 and 560 pounds, while the 6.4 comes in at almost 600 pounds. So we're getting more horsepower in a significantly lighter package. Whether you like the sound or not, when it comes to performance, that's undeniable. Now, they even offer dimensions for the engine. If you were curious of what the size is, the standard output engine is 33.4 inches by 28.7 by 32.7. The high output version, they said, checks in at 33.9 inches by 29 inches by 33.4 inches. Now, one thing I forgot to mention about the intercooler setup on this particular engine, unlike most turbo engines where the intercooler is set up front of the car with the radiator, this one is saying it is getting a water-to-air intercooler that is attached to the engine, which if you look at the photo here, you can see the big silver intercooler there on the passenger side of the engine. Now, Stellantis has confirmed that this engine was in production since November, which I did cover in my first video regarding this, and that this is going to be a $2,000 option for the Jeep Grand Wagoneer, which is going to be the first vehicle that this is going to be found in. $2,000 option does sound like a lot, but we're getting the power, you're getting a little shaved weight, you're going to get better gas mileage, although they don't mention the gas mileage. They just say that the mileage would be better. Now, that is an option above the 6.4 liter engine, which is still going to be there. So we do know that it's going to be in the Jeep Grand Wagoneer for a little while. I think that the Hemis are going to stick around at least for the first year or two, if they're to be phased out. I don't think it's going to be an initial replacement. I think that'd be kind of hasty, but it's going to be offered with a 6.4 with 471 horsepower. So at least for the first year of introduction of this engine, you will get a choice between the 6.4 or this 3-liter twin turbo inline 6 at a $2,000 option, that is. Now, Stellantis did have this to say in an interview, and I quote, "As Stellantis aims to become the U.S. leader in electrification, with 50% battery electric vehicles sales being made by 2030, internal combustion engines will play a key role in our portfolio for years to come, and we owe it to our customers and the environment to provide the cleanest, most efficient propulsion possible." So right there, they even stated that although they were diving deeper into the electrification, that they're not ditching ICE engines. We are going to have internal combustion engines for years to come, and they say this is going to be basically the backbone of it. They're also saying that Stellantis is aiming to cut 50% of emissions by 2030, and that will achieve their net carbon zero by 2038. Now, those are 2 out of the 3 variants. We also know a hybrid version is coming, although we don't have information on that one yet. The SO and HO variants, though, are very impressive in my eyes. I know a lot of you do not like this idea because you prefer the Hemi V8. And I get that. I love the Hemi V8. I prefer it as well. But if we're going to have something to, I don't want to say replace it because it does sound like we might still be getting it for another year or two. This sounds like a really good engine. And we all know turbo engines can be tuned for significant gains with no other changes. I mean, take Ford's EcoBoost engines, for example, although many people don't like them either. Just a tune alone on a completely stock vehicle is netting 60 extra wheel horsepower and torque in some applications. So imagine the possibilities of what these engines could do. So as always, guys, please leave me your comments down below. Let me know what you think of all the information we went over today. Do me a favor, drop the like on the video if you made it this far. I do greatly appreciate it. I'm Kevin, and I'll see you in the next upload.